In this clip, we're going to learn how to set up a NavMesh agent. So NavMesh agents are set up on objects that should use the pathfinding system from the NavMesh. Now, for us, we're going to be using this on our player character, and the player character is actually going to use NavMesh as its pathfinding solution. So we're creating kind of a click-to-move style of game here. And so if we click on this point here, it's going to check the current location and then find a pathway around to that point based on the NavMesh. So to set up an agent on our player, we need to apply it as a component. So if I were to go to Inspector, and then with the player selected here, let's go to Add Component, Navigation, NavMesh Agent. You'll notice that it applies this cylinder around our player character. We want to make sure that this defines the overall height and shape of our character. So in this case, we're going to be setting our NavMesh agent to the type of humanoid. And it's important to know that you can actually set up other types of NavMesh agents, and perhaps they have different areas that they can move in and different ways that they can actually interact with the pathfinding. So for us, we're just going to stick with the default humanoid. So under this, let's modify the height of this. Let's go to 1.6, and then we're going to take the radius. We could probably modify this down to maybe about 0.4. That would give us a little bit of a tighter nav mesh here. However, we probably want to go ahead and stay at 1.5 because thinking about how the object is going to animate and his stance, especially when he's running or walking, this would be pretty good bounds for that. And we would keep it from going into maybe some surfaces or something like that. So this feels pretty good. And now what I want to do is I want to get this ready to use the NavMesh agent. So I want to start putting it onto the NavMesh and then even just kind of looking at how we can get it to start to steer onto the surface. So let's go to our navigation mesh. You'll notice that we're not on the navigation mesh to start out, so I would just like to place that in the proper place there. And then once we have all of that, we can start looking at what scripts we can use. Now, I already have some scripts that are already created just so we can look at this pretty quickly. So let's go to the scripts folder. And actually, I need to bring that in. And again, this is going to be part of your project file, so you will probably already see it here if you've imported the package for this module. So let me go ahead and bring that in. Okay, so I went ahead and I brought those scripts in that we're going to need for this. And again, you will probably already see that they're there. They're going to be part of the Unity package and the project file. So go ahead and have those ready. So here, what I want to do is I want to select my nav mesh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the world interaction script. And this is basically the base script that is used to click on objects in the scene. And if we're not clicking on any object that is interactable, it will just simply move to that point based on the nav mesh. So what I need to do is go ahead and add a component to my player object, and we're going to go to scripts and then world interaction. And then I believe that's everything that I'm going to need at this point. So if I go ahead and I hit play on this, let's actually move our main camera to the player. And that's actually going to be another script that should be here. Let's actually import this in, and we can import this from another package here. So I'm going to go import, and then I'm going to use utilities. And let's just bring in 2 scripts for this. So I'm just going to turn everything off. And what I'm looking for is in the utility folder, and I'm looking for follow target, and we should have smooth follow. Okay, go ahead and import that. And let's add smooth follow to our main camera. So the main camera, really quickly, I'm just going to position it over the player. So let's hit Control-Shift-F, so that way it's over the player like this. And then we're going to add the smooth follow to the components here. So I'm just left-clicking and dragging that over to the inspector. Let's set the transform target. So we're going to bring the player object over. So that's going to be Dwarf Hero. So left-click and drag, hit from the hierarchy to the transform target area. And let's set our height to 10 and our distance to 5 on this. And then what we can now do is hit play, and we'll see that our camera is always going to follow the player. Now you'll notice that the lighting is a little off. It's still trying to bake because we're in play mode. But now I should be able to click on this area and begin moving. Now you'll notice that my script has thrown an error at the bottom here and in the console. And so I need to ratify that situation. So let's hit play. And this is basically because we forgot to assign something to one of the scripts. So if we left click on this, we can see that it's looking at the script that's on the Dwarf Hero. So if I were to select that guy, it has to deal with the world interaction script here. And so what I would do is just go ahead and double click on this, and it will bring up Visual Studio, and it will show me exactly what the error is. And it should jump to that. Now here it's saying, it's looking at this line of code. And we're going to talk more about scripts here in just a little while. So don't get discouraged if you don't understand what's happening. So what's happening here is it's saying, okay, if we press the left mouse button down and we don't have, or we have a Unity event system, we need to get the interaction of the object itself. And so right now we don't have an event system in the scene, and so I need to create one. So I'm just going to close this down, and we're going to go ahead and go to the scene, and let's create empty, and let's go ahead and call this event system. And then on this object, I'm just going to add the component event system. So you can actually type that in, and you'll see it right here. So that should be everything that we need. You can see here that it has this little checkbox saying you can send navigation events. That's all I need this for. So now if I hit play, I can come in and I can start to click on the surfaces, and our player will move across that terrain. Perfect. So now the NavMesh agent is actually driving the position and the rotation data of the player. You'll notice that the player is not animating. And I like to set the NavMesh agent up first without the animations, just to kind of get a feel for what's happening. So let's go back to our player object, and let's check out the NavMesh agent. I like the overall speed that we're getting. We might even speed him up to maybe about 5, but I'm really not liking the angular speed. I feel like it's just a little bit too slow. And so what this means is how fast the object is rotating to get to where he needs to go. And so what I would do is maybe just double this to 240. Now we also have acceleration, and what this means is how fast the object is going to get up to this speed of 5. And right now we have it set to about 8. I feel like the acceleration was pretty good on that. However, we could bump it up to make it instantaneous whenever the player moves. Typically, whenever we see these top-down dungeon crawler style games, the movement is almost instantaneous. We want to give the player as fast as feedback as possible. And so it might make sense to even double the acceleration of that. Now, one thing to be careful of is that if you go too high on the acceleration, it could cause the NavMesh to overshoot the point in which he's supposed to stop. Now, there is a stopping distance, and stopping distance is set to 0. So what this means is that wherever we click, let's say that we click right in here, the nav mesh is going to move from the current location to that point without stopping any closer or away from that point. So if I were to set the stopping distance to 1 and I clicked on this point, the nav mesh would actually stop right about here. So I want it to be right on the object whenever I click it, okay, especially on the ground. So everything else is pretty good, and let's just hit play and see the behavior that we get. So if I click on this point here, you'll notice he moves a little bit faster and then gets right to that point. Let's almost make a 180-degree turn here and bring that back, and you'll see that he turns fairly quickly. I would actually like him to turn a little bit faster than that, because if I start to click on little points or small distances, he's not going to get turned all the way around and face that direction. And so let's go ahead and bump this up to about 360. And then what I should notice is a quick turn. Even at these shorter distance, it should work pretty well. So let's modify this even more. Let's go up to 480. And we should see that snap right to where it's trying to get to. Okay, and that feels pretty good. You might even be able to go up a little bit higher. Let's try 640. And this is all about just trying to get the behavior that you really want out of your player object. So now that we've talked about the baking of our nav meshes, we've refined them, and we've even set up a player agent, let's go ahead and move on into our next topic.